Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Storytime English. I am so glad you are here with me today. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders relax, and let this story carry you gently through time. Now, imagine for a moment that you are inside a small stone cell. It is barely 2 meters wide and 2.5 meters long. There is a thin mat on the floor, a metal bucket in the corner, a small window, high up on the wall, too high to see through properly. The walls are cold. The air smells of damp stone. You have been inside this cell for 10 years, then 20 years, then 25. You have not held your children. You have not walked in a park. You have not chosen what to eat for dinner. Every morning, you wake up in the same small room and look at the same gray walls. And yet the man in this cell is not broken. He is not angry. He is not afraid. He wakes up every morning, folds his blanket neatly, exercises on the cold floor, and waits. Because he knows, with a quiet certainty that nothing can shake, that one day the door will open. And when it does, he will not walk out with hatred in his heart. He will walk out with forgiveness. His name is Nelson Mandela, and this is his story. The year was 1918. On the 18th of July, in a small village called Mvetso, in the rolling green hills of the eastern Cape of South Africa, a boy was born. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakanieswa, was a chief of the Thembu people. His mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was one of his father's 4 wives. The boy's birth name was Rolilala. In the Xhosa language, it means pulling the branch of a tree, but in everyday language, it means troublemaker. It was a name that would prove surprisingly accurate. When Rolilala was 9 years old, his father died. The boy was sent to live with the regent of the Thembu people, a powerful chief named Jongintaba Dalindibo. The regent treated Rolilala like his own son. He gave him an education. He gave him a home. He gave him a future. On his first day at a missionary school, the teacher told every child that they must have an English name. The teacher gave Rolilala the name Nelson. From that day forward, he was Nelson Mandela. At the regent's great place, young Nelson watched how leadership worked. Chiefs sat in a circle and listened to every person who wanted to speak. Everyone had a voice. The chief did not speak first. He spoke last. He listened to all sides before making a decision. This idea, that a leader listens before he leads, stayed with Nelson for the rest of his life. Nelson was a good student. He attended a boarding school called Clarkbury, then Healdtown, and then the University of Fort Hare. Fort Hare was the only university in South Africa that accepted black students. It was a small, proud institution, and the students who went there knew they were among the lucky few. But Nelson's time at Fort Hare was cut short. He was elected to the student council, but he refused to serve because he believed the election was unfair. The university gave him a choice: accept the position or leave. Nelson chose to leave. He was 22 years old, and he had already made the first of many decisions that would cost him something dear in order to stand for what he believed was right. Nelson moved to Johannesburg. It was the biggest city in South Africa. It was loud, fast, and overwhelming. And for a young black man, it was a city of walls. Not physical walls, but walls of law. Nelson found work in a law office. He studied law at night and became a lawyer. Together with his friend, Oliver Tambo, he opened a law firm. It was the first black law firm in South Africa. Every day, ordinary people came to their small office with stories of injustice. A man arrested for not carrying his passbook. A family forced to leave their home because the government had declared their neighborhood whites only. Nelson listened to these stories, and each one made him more determined to fight for change. South Africa, in the 1940s, was ruled by a system of racial laws. White people controlled the government, the land, the economy, and the courts. Black people, who made up the vast majority of the population, had almost no rights. They could not vote. They could not live where they wanted. They could not use the same buses, the same beaches, the same hospitals, or the same schools as white people. In 1948, this system was given an official name: apartheid. In Afrikaans, the language of the white rulers, it means separateness. Apartheid divided the entire country by the color of people's skin. It told black South Africans that they were less than human, that they did not belong in their own country. Nelson could not accept this. He had grown up watching a chief listen to every voice equally. He had learned that every person has dignity. Apartheid said the opposite. It said that some people matter and others do not. Nelson knew, deep in his bones, that this was wrong. He joined the African National Congress, the ANC. This was an organization that fought for the rights of black South Africans. At first, they used peaceful methods. They organized strikes. They held marches. They wrote letters to the government. They boycotted businesses that supported apartheid. Nelson became one of the ANC's most important leaders. He was young, intelligent, charismatic, and fearless. He traveled across the country, organizing protests, meeting with communities, and building a network of resistance. The government watched him closely. They banned him from attending meetings. They arrested him and released him. They tried to silence him. But Nelson would not be silent. In 1961, after the government responded to peaceful protests with increasing violence, Nelson made a painful decision. He helped create a military wing of the ANC called Umkhonto we Sizwe. In Zulu, it means Spear of the Nation. They began to sabotage government buildings, power lines, and railway signals. They chose targets carefully. They wanted to damage property, not people, but they had crossed a line. In the eyes of the government, Nelson Mandela was now a terrorist. In 1962, Nelson was arrested. In 1964, he was put on trial for sabotage and conspiracy. The trial was held in Pretoria. The government wanted to sentence him to death. The whole world was watching. Before the court delivered its verdict, Nelson stood and spoke. He said words that would be remembered for generations. He said, "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." The courtroom was silent. He was not sentenced to death. He was sentenced to life in prison. Nelson Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a prison on a small rocky island in the cold Atlantic Ocean, about 7 kilometers from the coast of Cape Town. It was one of the most isolated prisons in the world. The wind was fierce. The water was freezing. Escape was impossible. For the next 18 years, Nelson lived in a tiny cell on Robben Island. Cell number 5, Section B. He slept on a thin mat on the stone floor. He worked in a limestone quarry, breaking rocks under the blazing sun. The white dust from the limestone damaged his eyes so badly that for the rest of his life he could not be photographed with a camera flash. The bright light caused him pain. The guards called him by his prison number, not his name. His number was 46664, prisoner 466, the year 1964. But prison did not break Nelson Mandela. Something remarkable happened instead. It made him stronger. It made him calmer. It gave him time to think. In his cell, Nelson read. He studied. He earned a law degree through a correspondence course. He talked with other prisoners. He listened to their stories. He learned their languages. He even learned Afrikaans, the language of his jailers. He believed that to understand your enemy, you must speak their language. To defeat hatred, you must first understand the person who hates you. He also asked the prison authorities for permission to start a garden. At first, they refused. He asked again and again. Finally, they gave him a small strip of earth in the prison courtyard. Nelson planted tomatoes, onions, and chili peppers. He cared for his garden every day, watering the soil, pulling out weeds, watching the green shoots push up through the hard ground. The garden became a small act of freedom in a place that had taken everything else away. Some of the prison guards began to respect him. They saw how he treated every person with dignity, even those who treated him badly. One guard later said that Mandela made him feel ashamed of apartheid, not through anger, but through his quiet, steady refusal to be anything less than a full human being. The years passed. 10 years, 15, 20. The world outside was changing. International pressure on South Africa was growing. Countries refused to trade with South Africa. Athletes refused to compete against South African teams. Musicians refused to perform there. The word apartheid became a symbol of injustice around the world. Inside South Africa, the resistance grew stronger. Young people took to the streets. The township of Soweto erupted in protest in 1976 when the government tried to force black students to learn in Afrikaans. The police opened fire. Hundreds of young people were killed. The images shocked the world. Through all of this, Nelson Mandela sat in his cell. He could not see what was happening, but the people of South Africa could see him. His face, his name, his story became the most powerful symbol of the anti-apartheid movement. Free Mandela. Those two words appeared on walls, on t-shirts, on banners in cities around the world. He was the most famous prisoner on earth. In 1982, Mandela was moved from Robben Island to Pollsmoor Prison on the mainland, and later to Victor Verster Prison, where he was given a small house within the prison grounds. The government had begun secret negotiations with him. They knew that apartheid could not last forever. They needed a way out. And on the 11th of February, 1990, after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela walked free. The images were broadcast around the world. A tall, thin, gray-haired man, walking hand in hand with his wife Winnie, through the prison gates and into the sunlight. Crowds lined the streets. People were crying, dancing, singing. It was one of the most watched moments in television history. He was 71 years old. He had entered prison as a young man of 44. He had missed his children growing up. He had missed his mother's funeral. He had missed his son's funeral. 27 years of his life had been taken from him. And yet, when he walked out of that prison, he did not call for revenge. He did not call for violence. He called for peace. He called for reconciliation. He called for forgiveness. This is the part of his story that is hardest to understand, and most important to remember. After 27 years of imprisonment, after being treated like an animal, after watching his people suffer for decades, Nelson Mandela chose forgiveness over hatred. He once said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I did not leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I would still be in prison." The next 4 years were not easy. Nelson sat down with President F.W. de Klerk, the leader of the apartheid government, and they talked. They argued. They disagreed. But they kept talking. Mandela understood that peace required patience. It required sitting across the table from someone whose government had imprisoned you and treating him as a partner, not an enemy. In 1993, Mandela and de Klerk were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize together for their work in bringing apartheid to a peaceful end. In 1994, South Africa held its first free election. For the first time in history, every South African, regardless of skin color, could vote. People waited in lines that stretched for kilometers. Some waited for hours. Some waited all day. Old women who had never voted in their lives stood patiently under the African sun, holding their identity cards, waiting for the moment they had dreamed of for a lifetime. Nelson Mandela voted for the first time in his life. He was 75 years old. He won the election. On the 10th of May, 1994, Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. At his inauguration, he invited his former prison guards to sit in the front row. Think about that. The men who had locked his cell door, the men who had watched over him for 27 years. He invited them as honored guests. He served one term as president, just 5 years. He could have stayed longer. He was beloved. But he believed that true democracy means knowing when to step aside. In 1999, he retired. On the 5th of December, 2013, Nelson Mandela died at his home in Johannesburg. He was 95 years old. The world mourned. More than 90 heads of state attended his funeral. People lit candles in the streets. Flags flew at half-mast around the globe. And so, my friend, the story of the boy from Mvezo comes gently to its end. He was a troublemaker. He was a student. He was a freedom fighter. He was a prisoner. And finally, he was a president. But what made him extraordinary was not the title he held. It was the choice he made, the choice to forgive. Forgiveness is not weakness. Mandela proved that. Forgiveness is the most difficult, the most courageous, and the most powerful thing a human being can do. It does not mean forgetting what happened. It means refusing to let what happened destroy your future. And you, my friend, you are on your own journey. It may not be as dramatic as Mandela's, but every journey has its hard moments. Moments when you feel stuck. Moments when progress feels impossibly slow. Moments when you wonder if you will ever reach the other side. In those moments, remember the man who sat in a tiny cell for 27 years and never stopped believing that the door would open. Keep believing, my friend. Keep listening. Keep learning. And never stop moving forward. This is Storytime English. If Mandela's story touched you today, please leave a comment. Tell me, what surprised you most? Was it the 27 years in prison? The decision to forgive his captors? Or the moment he invited his prison guards to his inauguration? I would love to hear from you. There are many more stories waiting right here, and I will be here when you come back. Until next time, my friend, take care of yourself and never stop learning.